saw this great video sometime back that was technically an awareness test, as they call it, but it just illustrates so well the power of your focus. In other words, the idea of how, where you choose to focus in a situation determines how you view the situation, right? In every situation, there's positives, there's negatives, and what you choose to focus on will determine how you come away from that. It'll determine even how you view yourself and what you get out of the situation and what you miss in the situation. And anyway, it's just such a great video. You may have seen this before, but if you guys would hit the lights, I want to show it this morning.
This is an awareness test. How many passes does the team in white make?
Go!
The answer is 13. But did you see the moonwalking bear?
Go!
Well, that's crazy, right? I mean, how many of you didn't even see the guy in the bear suit the first time? Be honest. Be honest. Yeah. He was there the whole time right in front of you. It was all just a matter of where you chose to put your focus, wasn't it? And I like the bear a lot better than the basketballs, personally. But I bring that up because our passage here in Daniel 6 this morning is the perfect example in the Bible of that principle, of where you choose to put your focus determines your outcome, your situation, how you view it all. And it's a very, very interesting thing. Even the direction of your life can be determined by where you choose to put your focus in a situation. Where we'll pick up the story, it's somewhere around 539 BC. And for a few decades now, the Jewish people have been in captivity. They've been exiled. God had allowed this big army called the Babylonians to come in, take over Jerusalem, destroy the temple, and carry a bunch of the Jewish people off as prisoners to Babylon. And he did that basically as a punishment because they had been sinning seriously against him for like a long time, like hundreds and hundreds of years. He'd sent them warning after warning, you need to stop the way you're living, they wouldn't change. And so eventually he let this discipline happen. And among those captives, those Jewish captives, is the guy whose name is at the top of this book, Daniel. And in fact, when he was carried off into captivity, he was probably about 15 to 17 years old. So some of you guys around that age range, imagine being carried off in captivity at that age to this foreign land where they worship foreign gods and you don't know the king, and it's just kind of scary. But one thing you learn very quickly about Daniel, if you read his book, starting on page 1, chapter 1, is that it's actually his faith in God, this strong, uncompromising faith in God, that gets him through all this craziness, that helps him actually thrive even in that captivity. It's all the same is true of 3 of his friends that you meet in the first few chapters there, as they keep their focus on God too. They're repeatedly faced with these challenges of, hey, compromise your faith, compromise your values a little bit, or die. And they keep saying, no, we can't. God demands we worship only him, and we're going to stick with him even if you kill us. And they can't seem to kill him. And it's amazing. As a result, again and again, God comes through in such amazing ways because these guys have such an uncompromising, bold faith. In fact, even the unbelieving king of Babylon has to rethink his theology in the middle of what we've read in Daniel so far this past week, right? Because he's looking at stuff and God's getting his attention. And it's so interesting. And even as time goes on, and the Babylonians are eventually conquered, if you know your history, by the Medes and the Persians and their king Darius. And everything gets all crazy, all these transitions around, Daniel. I mean, imagine if, like, I don't know, some other country actually took over the U.S. and, like, got rid of the president and, like, we're doing everything our way now. Imagine the crazy transitions. Daniel even makes it through that because of his faith in God and his focus on God. And as a result, he continues to see God do amazing things. And there's just so much we can learn from his story, which is why I think this is maybe one of my top 3 favorite books out of the entire Bible. In fact, when we find Daniel in chapter 6, scholars think now he's about 80-ish years old, maybe 82, 83, somewhere in his 80s, okay? And look at how it describes him. at the beginning of this chapter. So he's been in captivity a long time, was captured as 15 to 17-year-old. Now he's 80-ish in chapter 6. Verse 1, as King Darius the Mede moves in and takes over, it says, it pleased Darius to appoint 120 satraps to rule throughout the kingdom. In other words, 120 senators, basically, with 3 administrators over them, one of whom was, anyone? Daniel, yeah. The satraps were made accountable to them, so the king might not suffer loss. Look at this. Now Daniel so distinguished himself among the administrators and the satraps by his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. Get that? So first thing, from his teen years to his 80-something-ish years, Daniel was still living for God, still keeping his focus on God, which resulted in him living this life of character and integrity for God that got people's attention in a good way. Which hits me as the first thing we can learn from him this morning, if you're taking notes. First thing, we need to keep a focus on God that is a lifelong focus on God. Right? A lifelong focus on God. One thing that always just is like fingernails on a chalkboard to me as a pastor, and I've heard it a few times over my, gosh, how many years of ministry now? Not just here, but 15, 18, 20 years of ministry now, is when parents will like come to church with their kids, and I'll hear the parents say something like this. I go to church because it's good for the kids. I go, okay, well, hopefully that's true, but what about for you? I mean, someday God's going to judge everyone, right? I mean, there's going to be this judgment, and it's not just your kids he's going to look at. He's going to look at your life too. And all of us need Jesus' forgiveness. If you haven't put your faith in Christ to save you, if you don't have your own relationship with God, it's not going to go well for you. He told us the ending. He goes, spoiler alert, only the Jesus followers get in. Only the Jesus followers make it through this judgment. And so all of us need it desperately, which also means for those of us who maybe have been Christians for a while, man, don't let your fire die. Don't lose your passion. As Jesus says in Revelation later on, he goes, don't lose that first love you have. When you first accept Christ and you're all excited and it's like, yeah, I'm going to go share Jesus with everybody. I'm going to read my Bible every day. That's that first love. He goes, don't you dare lose that first love. Don't let the cynicism of the culture suck it out of you. Don't let other Christians sometimes pour water on your fire. Sometimes I'll see that Christian's like, I'm so excited. They're like, silly new believer, they don't know yet. It's like, what don't they know? Jesus says be on fire. Lukewarm is bad. So it can happen if we're not careful. And we got to watch and make sure we have a lifelong faith, a lifelong passion. Now you grow, you mature, certainly. But how's your fire level? How's your passion level for Jesus? And if it's not doing well, then I want to direct your attention to a plant Amy and I have at home, which is also not doing well. And if you're watching online, I apologize. Someone actually who used to go to SEC gave us this when they moved away as a thank you gift. And just due to busyness and time and laziness and not very much of a green thumb, I suppose, it now looks like this, which is very brown. And I confess most of that's my fault. But here's the thing. I look at this plant every day, and I go, it's still green a little bit, and I probably could bring it back if I would just give it what it needs. If I give it water, give it some sunlight, maybe some plant food, actually care about it a little more than I do, honestly, I should. I could bring it back. It's not too late. And maybe some of you, that's your Christian life. You've been a Christian for a long time, but that's what, honestly, it looks like inside you. There's some green, but it's dying. And as Jesus also says in Revelation, he goes, man, if that's your spiritual life, strengthen what's about to die before it dies. Get back going. Give it what it needs. Just like the plant. The plant needs water and things like that. What do you need? You need prayer. You need worship. Don't miss church. Read your Bible. Get into it. That's how you bring it back to life. Intentionality. To be intentional about giving it what it needs. Obeying what Jesus says to do. Prayer, Bible, obedience, worship, fellowship. Because you can bring it back. Keep a passionate commitment to Jesus for your whole life. Have a strong, lifelong commitment to God. Because as we'll see, that's what makes all the difference here for Daniel, right? It determines how good the good times are, like we just read about, and it determines how well you handle the rough times that come up, which are coming before this chapter is over. But first, the good times, right? So since Daniel had kept his focus on God through his whole life, he'd lived a life of integrity as a result, right? Because if I want to honor God, if he's my number one focus, then he tells me to obey the authorities, as long as they don't tell me to sin, which this guy will in a minute, and Daniel will say no. But I'm going to honor the king if I honor God, because God commands me to do that. I'm going to honor my spouse if I honor God, because he commands me to do that. I'll actually love them better if I'm following God than if I just do my own thing. And so Daniel, because his focus is on God, he's living this awesome life of character and integrity that's impressing everybody. And by his 80s, he's actually gotten so much better, rather than bitter, as he's grown older, that the new king moves in, and people go, hey, king, you're looking for some new head honchos. This Daniel guy's pretty awesome. You should pick him. And so they do, which is good news for Daniel, because I don't know how well you know your history, but when a new king moves in, he has two questions, right? First one, who do I trust? And number two, who do I kill? Okay? And Daniel wants to be on that first list. And thankfully he is, because someone talks him up, apparently. So Darius takes Daniel, puts him in charge of all the senators, which is great for Daniel, but they're not so much of a fan of that. Look at that, verse 4. At this, though, the administrators and the satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs. After all, excuse me, Darius. Yeah, we just helped you conquer this land, and you're putting a prisoner over us? Excuse me, this Jewish prisoner, this exile, over us? Oh, I don't think so, right? We're the ones who helped you conquer it. This isn't cool. We got to get this guy out. But Darius loves him. So next part, they were unable to do so because of Daniel's life too. Because Daniel lived his life like he did, they couldn't find anything. Look, it says they could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. Because he honored God, he did good work. He honored the king. And so there's nothing they could say wrong about him. So they get all frustrated. Verse 5, finally these men say, we're never going to find any basis for charges against this guy, Daniel, unless it has something to do with the law of his God. Man, while that is diabolical, I pray the same could be said of us. Don't you? You know, that we would be so focused on God in how we live that the only thing anyone who's a non-Christian could find wrong with us would have to have something to do with God, because he is everything to us, and there's nothing else they could find. Which is probably a good second lesson from Daniel. Keep a focus on God that's integrous. Ooh, big word. What do I mean by that? In other words, keep a focus on God where you do what God says to do, whether anyone's watching or not. Well, he's always watching. But you know, when you're by yourself, you know, integrity is who you are when no one's watching, right? That's kind of a fun definition of it. Keep an integrous focus on God. Do what he says, whether anyone's watching or not. When you're the only one at the store, in the classroom, wherever, do you still do it like if the boss were right there watching you? Are you working for Jesus, not just your boss? Don't just listen to a sermon. Don't just read the Bible. Do what it says, James says. Are you doing what it says? Are you keeping an integrous focus on God? Living for him, literally, to where he might be the only one who sees you pick up that piece of trash from the gutter so some poor sea turtle doesn't choke on it next Tuesday. But God goes, that's my daughter, that's my son, good job. And that's all you need. Do you keep an integrous focus on God? You'll be a good employee at your job because he tells you to be. You'll honor the people in charge because he commands you to. You'll love your spouse, your family, like they need to be loved because he commands you to. Most importantly, you'll have a close, intimate relationship with him. Because what does Jesus say? You love me, obey me. He doesn't say, if you love me, sing me a song. That's nice. If you love me, read your Bible. Okay. If you love me, do what I say. He says that like 3 or 4 times in one chapter later in John. Are we showing him we love him by how we live all the time? You'll find joy. You'll find freedom. Those come from humbly obeying God. Living with integrity. Whether everyone sees you or only he sees you. Whether everything goes well as a result or everything falls apart. Watch this next part, right? Things were going good. Verse 6. So these administrators and these satraps, they go as a group to the king and say, may King Darius live forever. Oh boy. When someone's trying to butter you up, you know there's something up. These guys, oh, King Darius, may you live forever. You know, if King Darius is smart, he's going to go, what do you want? But he's not, because he has an ego, and they're playing right to his ego. King, the royal administrators, verse 7, the prefects, the satraps, advisors, governors have all agreed the king should issue an edict and enforce the decree. Check this out, King, that anyone who prays to any god or human being during the next 30 days, except to you, your majesty, they should be thrown into the lion's den. Notice the setup here. Okay? Verse 8. Now, your majesty, issue the decree. Put it in writing so it can't be altered in accordance with the law of the Medes and the Persians, which can't be repealed. See, in their culture, once a law was made, period, it's done. Even the king couldn't change his own law after he made it in their culture. So notice the setup. To take Daniel down by getting the king to set up a stupid law that appeals to the king's ego. No one should pray to anyone but you, king. And he goes, yeah, I am pretty awesome. So he falls for it. Verse 9, King Darius put the decree in writing. And suddenly Daniel's in a very difficult position. He can honor the king he loves and sin against the God he loves more. Or he can honor the God he lives for, dishonor the king, and get executed. And those are his only two options. What would you do in Daniel's place? I mean, imagine if, like, this afternoon, President Trump signed an executive order that said if you pray to anyone other than him for the next 30 days, right, you'll be immediately executed. And they know because they're always watching on your iPhones, your iPads, the cameras, they know. They will know instantly. If you pray to anyone other than him, you'll be instantly executed. A horrible execution, too. Just pretend for a second. Think about what you would do. I love personally what Daniel does, and I hope I'd have the guts to do the same thing. Verse 10, here's what Daniel does. Now when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened toward Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to God, just as he had done before. I love that. Got some bad news? Cool. Daniel takes it straight to God. God, got some bad news today. Here's what it is. Just like he would have done anyway. I love those two things together. He gets the news. He doesn't freak out. He doesn't, go organize a protest or a march or tear down a statue or who knows what. He doesn't do anything crazy or stupid, go on his social media and tweet about how bad the king is. He just does the same thing he would have done any other day. This is a problem? Cool. I'm taking it to the God who's bigger than the problem. I'm going to pray just like I would have anyway. He stays faithful and dependent on God despite the circumstances around him. And I love this. It says he even gives thanks just as he had done before. Love that. Here come 3 and 4 for your notes there. Keep a faithful focus on God. And keep a focus on God that's grateful, gratitude-filled. Right? Don't miss that second part along with the first part. Because if you don't know that right there, that is the right answer according to the Bible. In terms of Daniel's situation, that is the right answer to beat anxiety and fear and worry. When life gets rough, you don't let the rough stuff pull you away from God. You don't let the rough stuff say, well, maybe I should kind of back off on the Christianity. You let it drive you more to him than you were before, right? You let it drive you closer to him. You keep praying, but now you pray about the rough stuff. You press in closer to God as a result of tough times, and you do it like Daniel does with thanksgiving. In other words, you don't just focus on the problem, right? Oh God, there's this horrible new law, and it's going to kill me if I pray, and I'm praying right now, so I'm probably going to die. Oh no, you don't just focus on the problem. You also focus on everything you have to be grateful for in the midst of the problem. What? Seriously? Yes, really. As the Apostle Paul writes, one of my favorite verses in the New Testament, he says, Christians, don't you be anxious about anything. Anything, by the way. It doesn't say anything except this or that or cancer. No, don't be anxious about anything. I don't care what it is. But in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your request to God. There it is again. Don't worry about stuff. The second you start to worry, let that be a reminder to pray. I'm worried. Okay, that's like a red light on your car that says it needs repair. I'm worried, red light, that means I need to pray. Let worry be a reminder to pray. And to pray with thanksgiving. And then he tells us why. Because if you do that, the peace of God, which you're not going to understand, by the way, transcends all our understanding, it will guard your heart and your mind in Christ Jesus. As someone who has experienced exactly that a number of times in life, let me assure you, it works. But you have to follow the prescription to the T. You need to pray about the worries with thanksgiving. It's both together. Don't miss the second part. Because for one thing, when you remember everything God's done for you in the past, it gives you faith in him in the present for the future. I'll say that again. When you remember what God's done in the past, it gives you faith in him for the present and the future. It's the difference between praying like A and B. A is the freak out prayer. God, I don't know what I'm going to do. What am I going to do with this problem and this situation? It's so scary and everything's falling apart. What am I going to do? Prayer A. Prayer B. God, this is a big problem. What are you going to do? Thank you for all the ways you've come through for me last time something like this came up. Thank you that you hear my prayer. You care. You have the power to deal with this your way. Let me ask you something. If AIM is faced in the next month with another government investigation, do you think they're going to be nearly as worried as if they were worried at all as this time? No, because they can look back and go, God's got this. Look what he did last time. You thank him for things. You remember what you have to be thankful for in the midst of the stress you're facing, and watch what God does. It's a very different prayer. Oh, I'm so worried, God, what am I going to do? God, this is a problem. What are you going to do? You always take care of stuff like this. I need your help again. I can't wait to see it. Two very different prayers. One's going to probably freak you out more by the time you're done. The other one actually can bring you some peace. So pray with gratitude. Praying with gratitude changes everything. You don't give up on your faith when the tough times come, even if the tough time is directly trying to get you to, like this was. And you pray with gratitude. Which, understand, okay, that's not saying you somehow live in denial of the situation. Because I see some Christians in our culture that get that very wrong. Oh, just praise the Lord. Well, what about, well, just praise the Lord. Okay, we're not talking about living in denial. Notice, Daniel faces the problem head on, but he brings it to God. That's the difference. God, this is a big problem. This is a big problem. They could kill me. They said not to pray to you. This is big, but you're bigger. Very different prayer. Once you acknowledge the problem, then you realize you have a choice where you put your focus. I can focus on the bouncing basketballs or the dancing bear. Right? I can focus on the problem or the God who can fix it. You choose your focus. Stop asking, what are you going to do? Start asking, what's God going to do? I love how Daniel prays here too, by the way. Notice it says he prays toward Jerusalem. That's in there for a reason. Because back then, it was this idea that Jerusalem to the Jewish people represented where God's presence was. It's where the temple was before it was destroyed. But it's this idea that that's where God's presence was. So basically through this entire thing, Daniel's keeping his focus in the direction of God. It's a symbolic thing that's very, very much a lesson we can learn from. And that makes all the difference. Keeps his eyes on God. Because wherever you put your focus, that's the direction you go in. Right? It's the direction you go in. So turn your focus to God and keep it there like Daniel does. Especially when things go from bad to worse, which happens next, okay? The decree's bad enough, then Daniel gets caught. Remember the troublemakers? Verse 11. Well, these men then went as a group. They always go as a group. What is that? And found Daniel praying and asking God for help. So they went to the king and spoke to him about his royal decree. Didn't you publish a decree that during the next 30 days, anyone who prays to any god or human being except you, your majesty, would be thrown into the lion's den? And the king, with his little ego, well, the decree stands in accordance with the law of the Medes and the Persians. Can't be repealed. Get this next part here, verse 13. Then they said to the king, well, Daniel, who is one of the, what? Anyone? One of the exiles. From where? Judah. In one sentence, they play the class card and the race card against Daniel. He's one of those filthy exiles, one of those filthy Jews. One sentence. Nice guys. And then they say, he pays no attention to you, your majesty, or to the decree you put in writing. He still prays 3 times a day. And it's probably right about there that the king realizes, oh no, my pride got me in trouble just now. Because he liked Daniel. But he got so caught up in his own ego that he ended up hurting the people he cared about. That's a whole other sermon, but take that one with you too and file it somewhere away. Watch out for your pride and your ego. It can have very bad consequences. So verse 14, when the king heard this, he was greatly distressed. He was determined to rescue Daniel and made every effort till sundown to save him. But verse 15, then the men went as a group, always as a group, King Darius said, remember, king, remember your majesty, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, no decree or edict the king issues can be changed. Verse 16, so the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel and threw him into the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, may your God, whom you serve, continually rescue you. A stone was brought, placed over the mouth of the den. The king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the rings of his nobles, so Daniel's situation might not be changed. Then the king returned to his palace and spent the night without eating and without any entertainment being brought to him. And he could not sleep. Isn't that interesting? The king is in his palace with everything he ever wanted, and he couldn't sleep. But you know who probably could? Daniel, right in the middle of the lion's den. Why? What's the difference? God and your focus. The irony there. So, since he couldn't sleep anyway, verse 19, at the first light of dawn, the king got up, hurried to the lion's den. When he came near the den, he called to Daniel in an anguished voice, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions? May the king live forever. Daniel responds, my God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They haven't hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight, nor have I ever done any wrong before you, your majesty. The king was overjoyed and gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him, because, here it is again, he had trusted in his God. Lesson 5, do what Daniel did there. Keep a dependent focus on God. God, they're about to throw me in a den with hungry lions. Cool, God's bigger. But they're lions. Yeah, but he's God. Keep a dependent focus on God. Keep a stubborn, dependent focus on God all your life, man. Even when things are going good, and even when things are going bad, and when things get worse from bad, you keep a stubborn, dependent focus on God. Run to Him. One of my favorite paintings, by the way, is this one. I'll throw this up there. It's by a French guy named Breton Rivière. I love that. It's painted in 1890 of what we just read, Daniel in the Lion's Den. But what I love about this painting is how he painted Daniel. Right? He's 80-something years old, but he's standing there so peacefully and so boldly. And notice where he's looking. He's looking up toward the light. He's got his eyes on God, not on the lions surrounding him, looking like, oh, hey, I can use a meal, whatever. He's like, I don't care. My focus is God, not on the problems. I know the problems are there. I'm very aware. But my focus is up to heaven. And that's what I hope we learn from this. Keep your focus up to heaven, no matter what's going on around you. Yeah, a skeptic may say, you guys know I love apologetics. Yeah, but what if the lions just weren't hungry? I mean, come on. That's possible, right? I don't think that was it. Read verse 24. At the king's command, the men who had falsely accused Daniel were brought in and thrown into the lion's den, along with their wives and their children. That's just how they did it back then. And before they reached the floor of the den, the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. I don't think it was a matter of the lions not being hungry, okay? This was a miracle on God's part. Because as God says in the Old Testament, I think it's in 2 Samuel, when you honor Him, He'll honor you. And I love what happens next here, too. Look at this. Verse 25. Then King Darius wrote to all the nations and peoples of every language in all the earth. May you prosper greatly. I learned something here. Verse 26. I issue a decree that in every part of my kingdom, people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel. For He is the living God, and He endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and He saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He's rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. Get that. The king of the Medes, who was not a Christian, not a Jewish person, had his own little gods, got at least partly converted to the one true God because of what happened in Daniel 6. Right? Wouldn't have happened otherwise. Because, mark this down, Daniel had a contagious focus on God. What do I mean by that? Let other people see your focus on God. Don't make a big deal out of it. There's a big difference there. Don't make a show out of it. Look how righteous and holy I am. That's not the point. But don't hide it when the opportunity is there to stand firm for God and people are watching. Let people see it. Keep a contagious focus on God. Because I know, when there's someone you love or someone you work with or whatever who's like a skeptic, one of those grumpy skeptic people like Richard Dawkins, Lee Strobel, we saw his story, right? There's that temptation to kind of cater to them and tone down your faith and maybe miss church for them once in a while and cater to the skeptic. But notice, it's actually standing firm the skeptic might need to see. Because his thing is, well, how do I know God's real? And if you keep backing down, every time you back down, what do you say to him? No, God's not real enough for me. He's not real enough to actually stand firm for. It's actually standing firm skeptics need to see. Standing firm for God in this persecution and hard times may be exactly what shows a skeptic how real God is, like it did here. Never underestimate how standing firm in your faith can be a huge witness to someone else. In fact, as one commentary I read put it, I love this. It says, the entire purpose of Daniel chapter 6 is to show how God continued to work for Daniel and through Daniel to influence mighty rulers, to acknowledge the greatness of the Most High God. Can we get the perspective where, you know what, God, if throwing me in a lion's den and having me be put there unfairly is what brings you glory, sign me up. Can we get there? Look at this, verse 28. So Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. Which I realize some of us may read that and go, he did. So being falsely accused, being in exile, being persecuted, thrown into a lion's den, and living in a world of crazy changes, that's prospering? No, it's not prospering. But keeping your focus on God through it all is. Building your life on Him and His words is. It's like Jesus says, and we'll kind of close up with this here. At the end of the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And I love this analogy, especially living here, because some of you live on sand and some of us live on rock, right? The rain came down, the streams rose, the winds blew and beat against that house. Yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. Notice, either way, storms are coming. Either way, everyone on this earth will face tough times. How you make it through them or don't is based on what you've been building your life on. Daniel was building his life on God's words. And so when all this crazy stuff happened to him, and if you've been reading, his friends they do get thrown into like a fiery furnace for following God instead of the king. And God always brings them through it. It's how you build along the way that prepares you for the tough times, right? Daniel chose to build his life on God's words. And that's what made this book happen, right? That's what helped him to prosper in those circumstances. That's what made these kings who don't even believe in God say, yeah, Daniel's the guy for me. I'm going to put him in charge of some things. That's what made his character so impressive to the kings. That's what made Daniel pray with thanksgiving despite all the pressure and discouragement around him. That's what helped him sleep just fine in a lion's den while the king couldn't sleep in his fancy palace. It's what shaped his character, kept him encouraged during challenging times, gave him courage that you see throughout his book, helped him thrive, helped him literally over a lifetime thrive because he had a passionate focus on God and built his life on God's words. Can I challenge you to do the same? Or to keep doing it if you already are. Don't give up. Don't lose that passion, lifelong passion. Or if you're not, if you look like our poor flower in our kitchen, then here's what I want you to do. If you're not already signed up for it, text the word Bible to that number on the screen. And read through the rest of Daniel with us this week. Read through the whole New Testament when we start that. Get the Bible in your life. Get into it and get it in you. And start building on God's words like Daniel did. And make his values your values. What you look to. Okay, what am I going to watch on TV tonight? Well, what would Jesus watch? You know, some of you would stop watching certain shows, I think. You know, what am I going to do with my free time? Well, what would Jesus tell you to do with your free time? He's not against fun, but what kind of fun, right? Where would Jesus say to work? How would Jesus say to respond to your spouse when they drive you nuts? How would he say to parent your kids? How would he say to handle school and finances and life? What would Jesus say to do? You don't know if you never read it. But if you read it and you build on that, he goes, that's a solid foundation, man, and nothing can take you out. The storms will come, but you'll make it through. You'll actually thrive through, and maybe even have a cool story like Daniel does, over and over and over throughout your life. The Bible tells us that's how Daniel did it. He didn't go into decline as he got older. He didn't get bitter and crotchety. He got better. And this is how he did it. The question for us is, will we do the same? Because it starts now. You're like, well, I'm not that old. Well, some of you might be like, well, I'm getting older. But wherever you are, it doesn't matter. This is where you start. He goes, you start today, you can bring that plant back to something beautiful. You can bring your spiritual life into something like this. Will you do the same? Let's pray. Father, thank you so much for all you have done in our lives, for all you are doing in our lives, for all you will do in our lives. Thank you for how you love us, how you care for us. You provide us with the perfect, solid foundation for life, which is your word. You didn't just leave us here to figure it out on our own. You said, here is what to do. To know you, to influence this world for good, to influence those around us. God, you are the foundation, your words. So help us build our lives on you. Help us focus on you and live with a spiritual intensity for our entire lives. An intensity that's dependent, that's faithful, integrous, and certainly contagious. Help us stand firm in our faith all the way to the finish line till we hear you say, well done, my good and faithful servant. In Jesus' name, pray it for us.